Something will go wrong eventually. It tends to do so. And we've learned that when we let it go wrong, we often don't have the technical or economic capacity to handle it. Climate change is on a remarkably large scale. And he didn't make that case either. I agree. Nobody wants to hear about global warming or climate change. But it gets to be a problem if you're trying to sell what's going to be, at the end of the day, a somewhat difficult policy. We really do need to price carbon and move away from the way we do our energy economy right now. If you're not willing to say one problem being global warming and climate change, or another problem being letting these risks balloon at us, and you're instead trying to sort of sell it in a friendly but vague way. That works when you're already there, when you're at the finish line. I don't think it works to take a country that isn't quite there yet and move them. This was not a speech about moving them. It was a BP oil spill speech. It was not a what do we do with this fossil fuel dependence speech. He's not given that one yet, and it's not clear if he will.
Ezra, let me ask you to contrast what we saw tonight with another politician who spoke a couple of weeks ago, already deep into the BP oil disaster. Another politician, different from the one we saw tonight, who gave a speech in Pittsburgh. In which he made a very, very different pitch. Here's the clip.
The House of Representatives has already passed a comprehensive energy and climate bill. And there's currently a plan in the Senate. In Pittsburgh, I want you to know, the votes may not be there right now, but I intend to find them in the coming months. I will continue to make the case for a clean energy future wherever and whenever I can. I will work with anyone to get this done, and we will get it done.
He did say some of those same words tonight, but it seemed like a very different guy. Could some combination of the guy we saw tonight and the guy we saw 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh actually make some progress here?
Possibly. So there are two things I think are important about tonight's speech. One is that it was about BP oil, right? I think a lot of policy wonks wanted him to really talk about climate change and talk about pricing carbon, but this was about the BP oil spill and the political problems therein and the feeling of anxiety in the country over it. So it was never in some ways going to be the speech I think you or I wanted. The second thing is that since that speech he gave in Pittsburgh, the situation has somewhat absurdly deteriorated for energy legislation in the Senate. Murkowski tried to bar the EPA from regulating carbon, which the Supreme Court said it had to do, and got 47 votes for it, which was pretty worrying. And then Lindsey Graham abandoned a bill, a climate bill that he helped write with John Kerry and Joe Lieberman. So I don't argue that Barack Obama has some sort of magic wand he can wave or magic speech he can give to get 60 when it doesn't exist. What I do think is that in American politics, there's got to be a place in between you got 60 for your bill and you don't have 60 for your bill, so you're not going to do it. Sort of a persuasive, explanatory place where you can go before the American people and level with them and say, listen, to the best of my understanding and knowledge, we have a problem here, and we need to at least try to act on it. And if you fail at that, you fail. But I'm not sure he's quite at that place yet. I wasn't convinced that after this speech that the next cycle in American politics would be about really serious carbon and energy legislation.
I think what you're talking about there is not just explanatory. I think it can also be emotionally satisfying. What's happening in the country right now is that we all feel helpless and we feel like we're not shaping our destiny. To be able to say, this is what we can do to shape our destiny, this is what I think we should all work on now in order to make some progress here, I think could have actually been cathartic. A missed opportunity, perhaps.
We've been a prisoner to catastrophe in this country for about 2 years now. And that's been, I think, a rough psychological thing to go through. And so I think you're right when you say that people don't want to hear about global warming, they don't want to hear about climate change. But it may be, in some ways, as you say, a little bit cathartic to say, we can do something about these problems. We can make this happen. And he did try to move on that rhetoric. He did try to say that we've taken on these great tasks in the past. I do just worry. I think that Barack Obama has generally been at his best when he's willing to sit down and level and talk to the American people as if they are true grown-ups who want to understand these issues. He's good at it at certain points late in the healthcare game, and I think he could be good at it here too. I just don't think they've gotten to the point where they feel their backs against the wall enough to try.
Ezra Klein, staff writer for The Washington Post, who I always find it cathartic to talk to. Thank you, Ezra. I really appreciate it. On Capitol Hill today, the top 5 oil executives in the world struggle to explain their industry's total inability to handle the environmental devastation they have wrought. And while they fiddled, the public burned and bermed and boomed and barged and did whatever it could to clean up private industry's giant mess. That's coming up next. And later, what does Harry Reid's Republican Senate opponent mean exactly when she says, quote, what we need to do is take Harry Reid out? We will talk violence and violent rhetoric with my colleague Chris Matthews, who has a new documentary out on the rise of the new right. Please stay with us.